So thanks so much, Carla, for coming on and participating in our sessions that we do to really bring out the people that are making a difference in our community. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So, as we always do, we begin all things by acknowledging the original stewards of the lands, various lands we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So please, Carla, if you don't mind, if you can introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and tell us about your remarkable work that you got going on.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Carla. I'm the executive director at Food Stash Foundation. We are a Vancouver-based and serving charity. We've been around for about 7 years now, and we're trying to tackle some really big issues in our own little way, both the issue of food waste and how much food is unnecessarily being tossed here in Vancouver, also more broadly in Canada, and then also hunger. So trying to get that good food to people who need it. These days we're rescuing and redistributing over 120,000 pounds of good surplus perishable food out to the community in a few ways. I can talk more about all the different programs later. And a little bit about me. I've been at Food Stash for over 2 years now in this role, and my background started out in international development. I've always worked in nonprofits, and community development work means a lot to me, to be able to get out of bed and know that I am doing something impactful, even in a really small way, wherever I'm living. So lived abroad in Kenya, Nicaragua, and Zambia for quite a while. And then when I found myself in Canada, shifted gears to more local domestic community development works. I worked in affordable housing and social finance for about 5 years. And then I switched over to Food Stash, where I am now.
Wow, all admirable, beautiful threads of life that you've gone through. That's amazing. And can you articulate your personal mission and vision for me?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure anyone's ever asked me that. I've touched on it really briefly, but for me, it's really important to acknowledge my positionality in the world and the privilege that I've experienced to date, and leverage that to do some good, whatever that looks like, wherever I am. Ideally, it's community informed, community driven. I'm not just coming in and saying this is what I think is helpful. It's in partnership with wherever the community is that I'm working. Just making sure that, if I'm in a position to work myself out of a job, that I can do that, whether, handing over the reins to more local staff, like I did when I was working for a nonprofit in Kenya, or, in the case of Food Stash, trying to understand the long-term vision for us as an organization, addressing these really big picture challenges, and trying to do it in a sustainable way that gets at the root of the issue instead of just being kind of a band-aid.
Exactly. Totally agree. And how important is social innovation in your work?
It's pretty important. I mean, I can't take any credit for it. Food Stash was founded by a local high school teacher who watched a documentary about food waste, got really inspired. He quit his job, borrowed his dad's car and basement suite, and started driving around town trying to convince grocery stores to donate their surplus food to him. And that concept 7 years ago was relatively new. It's caught on in a lot of places now. This acknowledgement that there's so much good food being wasted at all levels of the supply chain. We focus on the grocery stores in particular. So that innovative idea of, there's so much good food being wasted. Why it doesn't need to be wasted? How can we insert ourselves into that process and intercept it and get it out to the community? So always trying to come up with better ways and creative ways to use our very limited resources to collect more and more food and serve more and more folks who need it. So I think innovation is, it's like continuous improvement. There's always more that we can learn, and no one's ever doing anything perfectly. So we're always on the lookout to find new partnerships and work together with folks to do things even better than we already are. And that social thread is a common one all throughout our work. We're addressing the environmental side of food waste, but we're equally addressing the social side of hunger and food insecurity in some ways as well.
Absolutely. The two must marry each other really to have that, you know, um, balance of hope, really, So that's amazing. What inspires you most about your current work?
Hmm. Probably all the different connections and community partnerships that come together to make it possible. Whether it's, the 25 grocery stores that we pick up food from who are, going a little bit out of their way to set this food aside for us to pick up instead of throwing it away, or the 35 organizations that we deliver food to. They're serving some of Canada's most vulnerable folks in the downtown east side with housing and mental health supports and substance use supports. They're really on the front lines, and they're using food to build trust with their community and meet some basic needs so that they can then try and tackle those bigger issues that they're facing in that community. And then we have such an amazing group of volunteers. We're so reliant on volunteer labors of love, helping us sort food and pack the home delivery boxes that we deliver to folks with disabilities and help run our market every week. And then even little things like we share our warehouse with 8 other organizations, all doing other really cool stuff in the community, serving the community. Our rent is super expensive, so it's pretty nice to be able to share that load across a few organizations, but it also has created this really special space here where we all know that we're aligned in the work that we're trying to do and the impact that we're trying to have. So it's in themselves lots of little individual groups and actors trying to create change, but if you look at it at the whole, it's quite an impressive web of people working together.
Definitely. That sounds amazing. And what challenges and barriers do you face in your work, and how are you and your team working to overcome them?
Hmm. That's a doozy. I mean, first and foremost, as a nonprofit, a small charity, it's always money. We are kind of expected to fill these gaps in the system where people are getting missed. They can't afford to buy groceries in the store. They're reliant on these charitable food models, and yet the charities that are providing those programs are not being supported in order to provide those programs. So we hardly get any government funding. We're scraping together donations and grants constantly to do the work that we're doing, and it's hard to find really good people and pay them what living wages and what they deserve, and pay the really expensive rent and the gas and the fuel cost for our fleet. It's not cheap work, and so there's a lot of pressure financially for any nonprofit, but our work is quite expensive. The people power and the infrastructure, the warehouse and the fleet. So that's always a constant struggle. And then there's some really big picture challenges and underlying root causes that are at the heart of what we're trying to address. So when it comes to food waste, it's consumerism, and the food system is just designed to waste. Shrink is a line item in grocery stores' budgets. It's just an expected part of operations as opposed to something that we should actually try and understand and do something about. So it's hard behavior change and policy change to try and reduce food waste from happening in the first place is challenging. We're trying to collect all the data we can and feed it to the right people to try and encourage that. But it's long, slow work. And on the flip side, with food insecurity, it's similar. The government keeps pouring money at these kind of band-aid solutions like the food bank system. We've institutionalized this food bank system where that's just how poor people are expected to get their food, instead of addressing the poverty that's driving their need to access food in that way. We're just keep giving them more food, and we hope that giving them more food is going to magically not make them poor anymore, but that's just not how that works. So again, more behavior change and shifts in policy and mindset to really get to the root of the poverty that's driving food insecurity. And so we're here in the middle of these two big problems, trying to patch together interim solutions, but acknowledging that they are interim. And so we're increasingly trying to speak up and advocate for those policy changes that we think need to happen in order to work ourselves out of a job or into a different kind of job. Hopefully we don't need to exist at some point.
That's really, really, a key pressing issue is being in that middle. Like, yes, we are solving a problem, but at the same time, there's still the root of the issue that's not being addressed to its capacity that it can be. And it's that hard set that you're like, oh man, which side, is most important to address first. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
People need the right now, but there's also the root that needs to be addressed simultaneously, if you ask me.
Exactly.
You're feeding that need, that immediate need of hunger and survival, but at the same time, hey, we need to be digging the weed out, or else there's just going to be more weeds growing, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
really important. I love this. And do you have a set of key priorities in your work right now?
Our top priority, I would say, is this concept of dignified food access. So we're not just handing out food left and right and throwing food on people and hopefully they like it. We're really, really intentional about how we distribute food through our programs. So, whether it's our drivers on the road, they have really great relationships with those 35 organizations that we deliver to. They understand who those organizations are serving and what kind of resources they have. And, this housing shelter, there's no knives on site, so they like the pre-cut fruits and veggies. Or, this one has a kitchen and staff and they love making soups, so they really love the potatoes and the celery and the tomatoes. It's so nuanced, and that relationship is key because we want to say, hey, this is the food that we got today, which we never know what it's going to look like. So it's always changing. So we say, this is what we have. What do you want? What do you need? How can we best serve you and your community? And so that's that program. When it comes to our home delivery program for folks with disabilities, every box is pretty much different. We have a list for each of our members in that program, we know what their dietary restrictions are, but we also know what their preferences are. Whether that's culturally appropriate food or they just like, green peppers and they don't like red peppers, whatever it is, we take the time with our volunteers to pack those grocery boxes for them in a way that we know will best suit their needs and hopefully also create the least amount of waste if we're giving them food that they really like to eat. And then with our market, the same theme runs through of that choice, making sure people, as they come through our market, they choose, they tell us what they want. We're not forcing food on anybody. So that those concepts of dignity and respect are really important to us, and breaking down barriers to access our programs too. We never ask for ID or any income testing. People come as they are and we don't ask any questions. We're here to serve anyone and everyone regardless of their situation. So that's really first and foremost for us, and just focusing on how we do our work in addition to what we're doing.
There you go. Didn't want to come off me there. Yeah, but that's so honorable. That's so amazing, really zoning in on the preferences, so that shows care. It shows that concern and empathy. That's really good. And how do you feel about the future of food sovereignty and regenerative practices in Canada?
Hmm, that's a good question. It's a big one. I mean, the food systems here are so ingrained and institutionalized how they operate and industrialized these massive systems and corporations. I feel like a lot of food sovereignty is reclaiming some of that process, bringing it back locally, having local control and ownership over at least parts of growing and distributing food. I see it happening in little bits and pieces here and there. Um, I'm not sure I'm always super optimistic about, completely overhauling the system of capitalism that we've built and, growing and distributing food for profit instead of to meet basic human needs and rights. But it's definitely happening. There's more awareness for sure, which is the first step of how do we reclaim parts of the food system and give ownership of the food system steps to those who deserve to be owning them and controlling them. But it's definitely it's a tricky issue and it's a big one. But the least we can do is control our own local situations. We try and grow however much food we can as a community locally. Growing in Vancouver, you can grow food on rooftops and on sidewalks, and people are turning their front yards into gardens instead of lawns. Little things like that, they add up. And we have a good fortune of working with a few organizations that are doing pretty cool, innovative things like that, growing food on rooftops or whole farms that are in containers on a big open parking lot in the middle of the city. So little bits and pieces will hopefully add up to be some meaningful change.
That's right. That's right. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, they have that in Toronto too here. The best that they can, growing
Mm.
spaces. Yeah, so that's really good. Amazing. And what is your ultimate goal? And what does success look like to you and your colleagues?
Oh, I think our biggest goal, first and foremost, is keeping all this good food from going to waste. So that's why we exist. That's why we have drivers and trucks and a warehouse, and we're driving 7 days a week, 364 days a year, because we know that there's so much good food that's unnecessarily being wasted. So we're trying to intercept that as much as we can. And whenever we hear of a new place that we can go find food to rescue, or tell people about this idea of rescuing food and how much food is being wasted in Canada, we take advantage of that. We work really closely with all the other organizations in the area that do similar work too. So we're kind of collectively maximizing and making sure that no food is ever not rescued. Um, and then it's what we do with that food. So that's first and foremost. Before we can serve the community with the food, we need to prioritize even rescuing it in the first place. And then otherwise, it's just serving the community in a good way, in a helpful way. I think there's kind of this endless pressure when you're a nonprofit and you're meeting people's basic needs and filling big gaps in the system. There's a lot of pressure to constantly grow and do more and serve more people. There's always more food that can be rescued, and there's always more demand for our programs. But I think we've recently tried to take a step back. We're having quite a big impact as one small organization. We've got limited resources, and it's really important for us to take care of our people too, and take care of our staff, make sure that they've got sustainable workloads so that they can continue serving the community with the care that we think is important to do their jobs well. So trying to fight back a little bit on this pressure to just grow endlessly forever, because there's limited resources and limited capacity, and just trying to focus more on what's the impact that we're having right now and how can we maximize it and just make it as powerful and as community serving as possible.
Great, great. All right. And do you have any closing thoughts or call to action?
For individuals, it's just raising awareness about these issues, even looking at your own household food habits. There's so many little tips and tricks to reduce food waste in our homes. Taking a picture of your fridge or your pantry before you go grocery shopping so you don't buy stuff that you already had. Doing a little bit of meal planning so you're, again, not buying more food than you can actually eat in a given week. And then there's all kinds of creative things you can do, making soups and smoothies and really leveraging your freezer to maximize the life of the food that you have. So just minimizing waste in your home. And then when you are grocery shopping, instead of looking for those perfectly shiny spherical apples, look for the ones that they've maybe got a little bit of a bruise that you could just cut off. Or the carrot that has two legs. Those funny looking fruits and vegetables are the first ones to get pulled out by the store staff and often thrown away if no one's intercepting it. So try and shop for those imperfect foods as much as you can. The best before dates is a whole other thing. Best before dates are different than expiry dates. So use your senses. There's lots of food waste related things. And then in terms of the bigger picture, kind of systemic issues of food insecurity, it's really policy change that needs to happen. So advocating with your local MPs or federally, getting involved to really push that agenda. We need to address poverty if we're going to solve food insecurity. We can't just keep giving people food and hoping that they get out of poverty. It's universal basic income, it's living wages, it's disability rates that rise with inflation. Those focusing on those social issues to address poverty will help get at the root of why there's so much food insecurity and hunger here.
That's it. Getting to the root. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
wow. Carla, this has been really amazing, very inspirational. I mean, just kudos to you on the work that you're doing. I wish everyone take heed to what you're saying, taking those tips, and like what you're saying, the best before and expiry. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know the
Mm-hmm.
difference, and so it's good to get that education. And I look forward to more interviews, just more connection with you, and you know, it's not on here, but can you just tell people how to connect with you or connect with your organization?
Sure, yeah, Food Stash. We've got Instagram and TikTok and all the fun social media things, and it's just foodstash.ca is our website. My email is carla@foodstash.ca. I'm always happy to chat with people and understand the work that they're doing and how maybe we can intersect or learn from each other.
That's it. Awesome. So we appreciate your time and remarkable leadership, Carla. And we close the way that we began this interview by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So once again, Carla, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. All the best to you and have a wonderful week.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes. All right.
Thank you for amplifying our work.
Absolutely.